I wish you luck in realizing your ambition.
Hey everyone, it's Blue Lizard Jello, and welcome back to Everything Possible in Elden Ring. Last time, we finished up in the Weeping Peninsula, put a temporary stop to the rebellion of Castlemorn, and we retrieved our first legendary armament, the Grafted Blade Greatsword, and we are finally going to be adventuring to our first legacy dungeon, Stormveil Castle, but we are leaving behind a trio of bosses for us to circle back around to later. First, we have the Crucible Knight at Stormhill Everjail, then we have the Bell-Bearing Hunter that appears at night at the Warmaster Shack, and lastly, we have the Tree Sentinel who's patrolling just outside of the Church of Ella. The reason that I'm not taking on these bosses right now is that, number one, they're actually rather difficult. So until we get some more levels and we begin upgrading our equipment, I believe it is best to leave them for the time being. But also, the loot that they drop, well, first off, the loot that the Bell-Bearing Hunter drops is really somewhat inconsequential. The only item that he drops is a bell bearing that allows you to purchase thin and beast bones, but you can farm them incredibly easily from the sheep in Weeping Peninsula and numerous other areas. And in terms of the loot that you get from the Crucible Knight and the Tree Sentinel, we would not even be able to use those anytime soon. So we will come back to those when we are a bit stronger. Now we only have a short way up this hill before we get to Stormveil Castle, where we will encounter Margit, the Fell Omen. This is our first real boss, and when I say first real boss, I mean this boss tends to give players a real challenge. I'm going to be showing actually a few different techniques that I have found on a few different builds that will hopefully make the fight a little bit more manageable for you. But before we even start making our way up there, I am going to do something that I haven't done yet, simply because I didn't have the runes at the time, and that is we're going to be traveling to Murkwater Cave, and we're going to meet up again with Patches. Go ahead and turn on our trusty lantern here, and we'll be going over what I am using right now in just a little bit. But we need 5,000 runes to pick up one item that will really help any build in the Margit the Fell Omen boss fight. We mentioned this earlier when we had actually met up with Patches originally, but the item that we're looking for is Margit's Shackle. Briefly binds Margit, once imprisoned, to Earth, a fetish bathed in golden magic. Shackles were used to bind the accursed people called the Omen, and these ones were made to keep a particular Omen under strictest confinement. This is going to... I should have actually bought it. Here we are.
Cheers for that.
This is going to, as its name implies, actually bind Margit to the Earth. Now, it doesn't work constantly. It will work twice in the boss fight and only in phase 1, and Margit will transition to phase 2 right around the 60% HP mark. So if you're going to use it, you want to use it early to get him to the phase 2, and then unfortunately you are on your own. Right, with that equipped, let's go ahead and head back to Stormhill Shack. And just for fun, I am using the following build, which is a term I use very loosely: the Demi-Human Queen Staff with the Sacrificial Axe in my offhand. And there was a comment, and it was a valid comment, saying that really the 5.5 weight that this axe takes up is not really a good trade-off for the minuscule amount of FP you get per kill. And you know what, that is valid. However, I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't show off some of the more unique items and weapons that you can collect in this game. And when we're riding horseback and killing just a few guards outside of Stormveil Castle, this can help keep us not quite topped off on FP, but keep us from relying too much on our cerulean tiers. For the fashion right now, I have the Guardian Mask, Page Garb, Vagabond Knight Gauntlets, and Foot Soldier Greaves, Rodigan Scar Seal just because, and only my flasks for now. This is all going to be changing when we get to the boss fight, and it's going to change after that as well when we get to the castle. We're just going to hop on Torrent. Now, the 3 spells that I have equipped, Glintstone Arc, Glintstone Stars, and Glintstone Pebble, all can be fired from horseback, which is great. But Glintstone Arc is my absolute favorite in terms of crowd control, for the reason that you see before you. Absolutely decimates. I haven't ever done the math, but I believe that with a big enough group of enemies, Glintstone Arc could very well have the highest DPS of any spell in the game. Bolt and some Lordsorn bolts. Now, if you just follow this path here, we're going to come across a Teardrop Scarab that has an Ash of War. You can see it just ahead right there. but there are several soldiers up that path and several that are hiding over in the trees. So what I like to do is actually head south along this cliff face and actually circle around. Makes it a little easier to get to that teardrop scarab. Now, just to give you an idea of where we're at, underneath this large bridge there are a few man beasts. That also led to this broken bridge where we met the finger reader crone. We also got a couple of items just over here, but if you see this path right along the side, you can actually use this to completely bypass Stormveil Castle. There's no reason this needs to be your first legacy dungeon. In terms of difficulty, I believe that it makes sense, but it's not necessary. Right, so let's go ahead, let's get Glintstone Stars activated, which can be charged for more damage. Whoa, and we're already being hit by some crossbows, so we'll just kind of list around lazily. Switch to our Pebble when we just need a little bit more damage. There we have it. There we go. All right, so we have one that just called for reinforcements. That's okay. Back up. Even when they guard through the magic, because it is magic, they are still going to take some damage. And this is really just to show off some of the really minor capabilities of magic. This is not meant to be an actual build. As you can see, taking plenty of damage. Now, if you focus on the one that actually has the horn, you can prevent this large-scale attack from even happening. I'd like to get a full charge, since he can't guard right now. Yeah, it's not great. In terms of DPS, the stars is just not really cutting it. There we have it. Alright, let's top off some health here. Yeah, Glintstone Pebble, though, just for its sheer low cost and decent damage, this is my spell of choice for early game. We're just going to keep on following the cliff face. Do have a few more enemies up here. But again, anytime they are somewhat grouped together, my favorite is just to take care of them with Glintstone Arc. Take care of the Ballista Shooter. And now, we can mostly head down here relatively safe. There we are. And use our Cerulean again. There we just got a flask refill. And let's take care of the Teardrop Scarab. There we go. And we get the Ash of War Wild Strikes. We've already seen this on a number of weapons. Now we can actually apply it to even more weapons. Ash of War Wild Strikes can be applied to axes, hammers, curved swords, and great swords, not including colossal swords, but the great swords. It allows for the heavy infusion, and as you can see just from the image there, you will swing your weapon around wildly, as the name would imply, and then you can follow it up either with a normal or a heavy attack. But believe it or not, that is actually it. From the Site of Grace all the way up to the next Site of Grace, which is just before Margit the Fell Omen. Now, if you did not teleport or run outside of Limgrave, then chances are this is where you'll first receive Melena's invitation to Round Table Hold. You'll rest here at the Site of Grace. You'll go against Margit, which is just through that archway right there. Likely die if you're a new player. And then when you come back to the Site of Grace, Melina will be there to welcome you with open arms and bring you back to Round Table Hold. But we rested at the Site of Grace at the Bestial Sanctum when we met Garank because we used the portal that Dee had marked on her map after we got a death root, and resting at any Site of Grace outside of Limgrave will cause Melina to invite you to Round Table Hold prior to this Site of Grace. Well, it is time for Margit the Fell Omen. I need to do a little bit of preparation because, as I said, I plan on showing multiple ways to fight Margit, both with and without Margit's Shackle. So, through the power of editing, for our first Margit the Fell Omen fight, and quite possibly my favorite way to fight him, and that is with the Grafted Blade Greatsword. Taking a look at its stat requirements, it has a 40 strength requirement in order to one-hand, which means that you need at least 27 in order to two-hand it. But with a combination of Radigan's Scar Seal and using the Flask of Wondrous Physic that includes the Strength Knot Crystal Tier, that will give us enough in order to use this for 3 minutes. Not only can we wield it for 3 minutes, but we can also use its Ash of War, which is Oath of Vengeance, which essentially is going to give us 40 free levels for 1 minute. Not too bad. Now, I won't need my Flask of Cerulean Tears. This is really all I'm going to need. Now, for each of these fights that I'm going to be showing off, I will be doing the commentary in post because I want to focus on the fight itself, and then post-commentary Blue can tell you exactly what it is I'm doing in order to take him out. I'll only show the cutscene with Margot the Fell Omen one time, and the other thing I want to mention before we step foot into the arena is this right here. We have a summon for an NPC that we haven't met yet, Sorcerer Roger. Now, Sorcerer Roger is in Stormveil Castle, so we'll meet him relatively soon, but if you're struggling with this boss fight, he can provide a great distraction along with spirit summons in order to take him down more easily. None of my builds are going to be focusing on an NPC summon or the spirit summons.
In search of the Elden Ring. Emboldened by the flame of ambition.
We start the fight right away by checking our Flask of Wondrous Physic, and with this particular build, really the name of the game is to absorb damage and deal it right back. Now with that tail swipe that Margit can perform anytime you're around his back, you can actually jump over, and if you know that you can jump over and then you perform an R2, you can get a lot of stagger damage. But as you can see here, if you circle around to his side, typically his left, you can actually avoid a lot of these attacks without even rolling. But because of the sheer amount of damage that this weapon can do, we got him into phase 2 pretty quickly, which is definitely the more difficult of the 2 phases, as second phase typically is. I am just tanking some of the damage. Now this is not my cleanest fight with this weapon, as you might have already guessed. But because of the poise and the hyper armor that you get with some of these attacks, it is possible to get incredible damage even after you sustain some damage from Margot. Rolling into him after he's done his big hammer attack allows you to get a massive R2. At this point, I'm just hoping I don't get knocked off the edge here. Circling around, avoiding the attack without rolling. 1 charge R2 later, and Margot is dead. Make sure to eat that gold pickle Foulfoot.
I shall remember thee, tarnished, smoldering with thy meager flame. Cower in fear of the night. The hands of the fell omen shall brook thee no quarter.
Killing Margot the Fell Omen will give you 12,000 runes or 15,600 runes if you remember to use your gold pickled Foulfoot, and you get a talisman pouch, which means we are now able to equip 2 talismans. And that's the fight with the Grafted Blade at Greatsword. Let's see another. Next up, we have an incredibly basic yet effective sorcery build with the Demi-Human Queen Staff, the Blessed Dew Talisman, because we're not going in with much healing, and then 5 cerulean flasks, as opposed to just a single flask of Crimson Tears. For my Flask of Wondrous Physic, I have opted to just simply put on, go ahead and show you here, the Crimson Burst Crystal Tier and the Green Spill Crystal Tier for more stamina and HP restoration. So, what exactly do we do with this really basic low-level sorcery build? You're looking at it. We shoot him with Glintstone Pebble over and over and over. Now, I made sure that I had 5 Flasks of Cerulean Tears. Now, as long as you don't miss, which you really shouldn't as long as you're locked on, well, you don't even need all those. The damage isn't too bad. You can see we already have him to about a fifth of the way down. And really, all you want to do is make sure that you are using all of your FP before you chug one of those flasks and put some distance. And that's it. That's the fight. Once we get him to phase 2, like you see here, of course it does become a little bit more dangerous, especially because he can close a lot of ground really quickly. But anytime he gets too close, make sure you have the stamina, dodge when you can, and then just run away. Sprinting during this fight is essential in my opinion. Is this the most exciting fight? No, absolutely not. But if you're going the sorcerer route, you may not have much more powerful spells at your disposal. And Glintstone Pebble is completely adequate in getting the job done. You can see there, because it allows you to cast Glintstone Pebble while you're moving, if you're far enough away, even when you cast those magical holy daggers, you can just walk to the left or right and still avoid them while casting. Anytime he does this big windup, if you're close enough, you can just run right behind him and get some attacks. Otherwise, dodge into them and then get ready to dodge the next follow-up. And that's how you kill Margit really easy with Glintstone Pebble. And again, eat a chicken foot.
I shall remember thee, tarnished, smouldering with thy meager flame. Cower in fear of the night. The hands of the fell Omen shall brook thee no.
And let's see the next build. Next up, I'm going to be showing how Margit's Shackle works, and I'm going to do so using the Bloodhound's Fang. Of course, I have Margit's Shackle. I'm using the Axe Talisman for the increased charge attacks. I will be applying some Fire Grease. Now, Margit is equally weak to all elements except for Holy. Margit is resistant to Holy, so do not apply Holy damage, but Fire Grease, Magic Grease, all those wonderful greases work phenomenal against Margit. For my Flask of Wondrous Physics, I have the Spiked Cracked and the Greenspill Crystal Tear. This is the fastest Margit kill I possibly have ever had. So I've already used my Flask of Wondrous Physic. I'm going to apply some Fire Grease to my Bloodhound's Fang. And let's go ahead and use Margit's Shackle and get a couple of really good charge R2s. Massive amount of damage already. Knock him down. Get the critical. And just keep up the attack. We're going to use Margit's Shackle for the second time. Remember, we have to use that before phase 2 starts. And with that bleed buildup, look at that. Down to a third of his health already. Dodging into the attack. Knock him down again. Now, as a reminder, these weapons are all completely unupgraded. Now, I used the Bloodhound's Fang skill there just to try to get a little bit of distance. Almost have him there. I'm refusing to heal, I guess just out of stubbornness. Dodging into this attack, getting ready for the next one, and Margit's dead. Very quickly. Eat that golden, delicious foul foot.
I shall remember thee, tarnished, smouldering with thy meager flame. Cower in fear of the night.
And let's move on to our fourth and final.
Brook thee no quarter.
And the last fight that I'll show with Margit is a parry build. I have Reduvia, and I have the Gilded Iron Shield. Now, in terms of what we currently have available, the Gilded Iron Shield provides one of the best parry opportunities because it is a small shield. In terms of how many frames are active during a parry animation, it does depend on the size of the shield, but also certain shield and certain skills get special consideration. But for now, anything that's considered a small shield with the parry skill will provide us the best opportunity. I have all lightweight gear because I am using the Blue Dancer charm. It's only giving me an extra 10 damage, however, it'll help. Probably, and I have converted all of my flasks over to Crimson Tears. Now, with bosses, most bosses cannot be staggered with a single parry. In the case of Margit, you have to parry twice in order to get the critical attack. Anytime you're trying to kill an enemy or a boss with parries and ripostes, you're looking at a high-risk, high-reward type build. Now, fortunately, even if you don't get the parry and you only get a partial, you'll at the very least take reduced damage. Now, as I mentioned, it does take, as you just saw there, 2 parries to actually open Margit up to a critical, but don't think that you can at least get a swing or 2 off during that first parry. You can see here, he does get staggered long enough that it's safe to get a couple of hits in and then just either back up or prepare for the next parry. There's a second riposte and the blood proc. We are going to be looking at phase 2 here now. Using Reduvia Bloodblade because he's already at a distance, so why not? Now phase 2 with this build becomes incredibly dangerous to attempt to get the parries because he has some massively long and long-reaching combos. It's not to say it can't be done, as you can see. But anytime you see one of his golden weapons appear, it's typically a good idea to just try and dodge those attacks, especially just dodge straight backwards. And that is that big windup again that you don't necessarily have to dodge at all. Once you see him clutch his cane above his head in 2 hands, if you're far enough away, he's going to charge at you. But if you just stay close and run around him, you can get behind and get either a charge R2 or a couple of free slashes. You saw that I tried to get fancy there by jumping over his tail, but because I was at a lower position, it just wasn't in the cards. Dodge into him, dodge that second attack. And there we go. Margit is dead for the 4th time today. Enjoy that crispy, golden, delicious, pickled fowl foot.
Remember thee, tarnished, smouldering with thy meager flame. Cower in fear of the night. The hands of the fell Omen shall brook.
And I think it's time to move on. Margit is a fell omen, cursed from birth. Most omen are actually killed shortly after birth because they are trying to excise their horns and they don't survive that ordeal. Not much else to say about the fell omen just yet, but rest assured there are a lot more omen to talk about and more about the omen's curse coming up. Now we have a lost site of grace discovered. I'm going to go ahead and rest. There's no reason not to at this point. We do have some runes that we need to spend, and I'm going to be changing up the build here in just a little bit, but welcome to Stormveil Castle. As you approach, you can see just the massive scope, but also the damage that has been inflicted upon this castle, and we're going to talk about why that may be and who the previous owner was in just a little bit. But the first thing you notice is that we get another site of grace immediately. And we also have this large gate, this large portcullis with a lot of shinies on the other end. And if you look through, let's see if we can actually get the telescope to look through for us. You do see some soldiers over there, some exiled soldiers. You have some ballista up on some elevated positions. Maybe not the best point of entry. But fortunately for us, that's not the only point of entry. Let's go ahead and activate this Site of Grace. Now I'm going to slip into something a bit more, I was going to say comfortable, but really conducive to survival is probably the way to put it, and I'll be right back. That's much better. So for now I'm using the Iron Cleaver with the Beast Crest Heater Shield. Now I have the no skill applied to this, so I can use the Kick Ash of War that I put on the Iron Cleaver if I so wish. By the way, if you want an Iron Cleaver, I got this by killing the Misbegotten in Castle Morn. So the Misbegotten wielding this weapon can drop it. It's fairly common. I also have the longbow with 50 crafted Firebone arrows, the fletched variety. You'll see those in use quite a bit in just a moment. For my fashion, Bandit Mask, Caden Armor, Vagabond Knight Gauntlets, and the Vagabond Knight Greaves. For the Talismans, plural, because we now have an extra one thanks to Margit, I have Radigan Scarseal and the Arrow's Reach Talisman. I have a very, very simple set of accessories here with the Flask of Crimson Tears and the Flask of Cerulean Tears. I shouldn't need anything else, but I can always add things on the fly if need be. I didn't actually change out my Flask of Wondrous Physic, which is something I forgot to do, so I'm going to do that here, but I did also level. I had enough runes in my possession to level up 3 times, so I'm now level 36, and I put a point into Vigor, Intelligence, and Arcane. Now these stats are somewhat inflated because of Radigan Scarseal, but you can do some math, I suppose. Typically when I'm just out exploring or adventuring and I don't have a boss fight up ahead, then I will often run Opaline Bubble Tier for that one single damage negation attack, and then the Crimson Burst Crystal Tier so I can get that HP restoration over time. So over to the left is an NPC we're going to meet here shortly, but first, to run down these steps, over on this corpse, get a single Furl Calling Finger Remedy in case you want to do some co-op. Then we're going to hop down onto these wooden platforms underneath this archway, which is going to remind me to put on my lantern just because. And we have a pair of fire grease. You can see again just the damage that has befallen this castle. So we have here a very, very deep crevasse. We're not going to be able to cross that, but there is loot on the other side, so just keep in mind that that is there. Grab ourselves a single Trina's Lily, and then we can actually go through where some sort of armament put a hole in that wall. And this allows us to loop back around, back to that Site of Grace. Of course, you can always fast travel if you wish. Making our way back up. Maybe I should have fast traveled a little bit further than I recalled. Now, you may be tempted just to drop down there, and that will lead you to that same path in the Trees Lily, but you do miss out on the Fire Grease, as well as the Furl Calling Finger Remedy. You can always go back and pick those up later.
Come over here, would you?
And this is Gostock.
You're tarnished, aren't you? I would advise against taking the main gate into the castle. It's tightly guarded by hardened old hands. Oh, try the opening right here. The guards don't know about it. You'll breach the castle undetected.
And it actually doesn't matter which one you go with. Even if you ask him to raise the main gate, you can still come and take this side area, and I recommend taking this side area. Taking that main gate from this direction is just, it's an exercise in futility. At least early on. When you're a bit stronger, sure, but we can come at it in a much more intelligent way. So I'm going to just follow his advice and take this side path.
Yes, that's the spirit. You're just the kind of tarnished that I like. I pray for your success.
Now, I don't think that he's being incredibly wholesome by suggesting I take this side path. He has a bit of a sinister motive. You see, there's a weird mechanic in Stormveil Castle that when you die and you collect your runes, you don't get them all back. You seem to be missing some. And that's because someone, who shall not be named, who's a lot taller than I am, steals your runes when you die. He'll even go so far as, in a little bit, to trap you in a room to almost ensure that you die. But I think the reason he wants you to take this path is because even though it seems rather safe, there are some somewhat formidable enemies coming up, but he knows the way around, and he can come and collect your runes after you've died, whereas if you take the main path, he's probably not able to just run up there and collect your runes because there's so many enemies and defenses. At least that's my own headcanon. He will actually become a pretty useful merchant here in a little bit, but more on that as we get there. So heading out the hole in this wall, jump up here, you can get a trio of rune fragments. And there are going to be some enemies that we're going to want to pay attention to. But for now, let's just keep looping around. And hop up all the rubble here. And you can see our very first enemy. That is a warhawk. Notice that warhawk doesn't have traditional bird feet. No, they have really sharp, dangerous blades attached to them. And there's even some more dangerous varieties out there. The nice thing is, if you like the look of those blades, you can actually get them to drop. It's a pretty rare drop rate. I think it's only about 2%. But farming doesn't take too long. There is another Site of Grace coming up. And in terms of how to kill them easy, this is what I like to do. Get my longbow with Mighty Shot, some fire arrows, and just take them out without ever even getting close to them. Easy. Instead of hopping down, though, we are going to hop up this way, up the ramp. And just over here, grab ourselves another smithing stone level 2. And you can see the Site of Grace right there. You can even hop down and go right to it. And pay attention to this spot right here, because we're going to see something a little bit strange here in a bit. But I'm going to hop down. I want to make sure I kill all the warhawks and get any loot that may be waiting. So we have another one in the tree right there. Now, if you're having a hard time hitting this one because it keeps hitting the tree, just remember you can manually aim your Mighty Shot. So let's just go ahead and do that. There we go. 405 damage because it was a headshot. So in case you're struggling with how to do this, on my PlayStation controller at least, I'm starting with L1, which is my manual aim, L2, which puts me into the Mighty Shot stance, and then R1 to fire my fire arrow. There we go. And just hop down here. So both birds drop something. Let's see what we get. I would love to say that I just cheated this in, and yet I don't know how to do that. But we got the Warhawk's Talon on the very first drop from a Warhawk. This is honestly one of my favorite straight swords in the game just because of how it looks. This weapon, nothing incredible about this. It's a rather lightweight straight sword. It only weighs 3 weight units, 10 strength, 16 dexterity. It's just such an awesome looking weapon. We might actually have to switch to it just because look at that weapon. It's so okay. Well, sorry, I'm gonna stop gushing over the fact that we just got that on the first drop. We got Flight Pinion. The most common drop they seem to have is actually the Stormhawk feathers. Stormhawk feathers are used to craft Stormhawk arrows, which we will be able to craft later on in Stormveil Castle when we get that particular cookbook or recipe book. Some bolts over here. You can see we're on the other side of that crevasse now. I'm sorry. I'm absolutely beaming at the fact that that just happened. If I get a second one, though, I might go buy a lottery ticket. So up here, and the reason I have the Arrows Reach Talisman on is because there are a number of Stormhawks over here, and we can kill them from pretty far away, thanks to Mighty Shot. And even if you can't see them, just use that target lock on. There we go. And what else did we get? I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on here. This has a 2% drop rate. I've gotten 2. Smithing stone level 3 on this corpse. Oh, this is gonna throw off this entire video, isn't it? Oh, well, I could maybe do a dual wield Warhawk Talon build? Anyway, we've made it to the Site of Grace. And I'm not just gonna rest just yet, although, frankly, I don't have any genuine reason not to. But coming up, we have some new enemies. We saw them on the other side of the portcullis. These are exiled soldiers. The exiled soldiers are actually pretty intriguing enemies. If you collect any of their armor, it says that these are soldiers sent to the penal colonies. They were actually sent away for some sort of crime. But also, many of them will employ different storm arts, wind-based attacks. And I'm just going to leave that alone for now. We'll come back to that in a little bit. But this guy right here, he likes to alert his friends. And that can be kind of harrowing to deal with more than one exiled soldier here on this walkway. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take care of him with yet another mighty shot. We get the Marred Leather Shield, a very, very interesting shield. I actually watched a video where someone used this infused with cold to defeat Melania hitless. But this shield, kind of like the Shield of the Guilty, will actually cause blood loss buildup. So if you want to use this in two hands and actually strike enemies or put on something like Shield Bash, you can cause blood loss just by attacking with the shield. Some say it is the curse of grafting which causes such affliction, while others talk of its root being something altogether more sinister hidden deep within the castle. And indeed there is something rather sinister in the castle, but it's going to be a bit before we get there. We got a mushroom off of that exiled soldier. Here's one coming to join the fun. Beautiful spinning slash with the Warhawk's Talon. Now, right over here, there are going to be some other exiled soldiers that are kind of waiting to the side to ambush you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to eke out just a little bit. And we're going to manually aim some mighty shots, because why not? We have the arrows. There we go. And there should be one more, but I'm going to need a little bit more FP here. And I'm not going to be able to hit him. I'm just realizing. Don't want to walk off the edge here. Alright, that ought to do. There we go. A little bit safer to come over here and collect our golden rune level 2. Now, this room right here, these commoners, the ones that look just like Gostock, once we enter this room, if we back up, we're going to see a familiar face in a kind of an unusual setting. So first, let's just go in and deal with them nice and quick like. There we go. One thing that I should mention is that the R2 of the Warhawk Talon is pretty unique. I don't know what other weapons have this R2 attack, but you can see here, without even charging it, it actually does a double slash. There's the charge attack, if I two-hand, another double attack, and same with the charge. Really, really fun weapon. But I'm not going to talk about how excited I am to have it. Now, let's go ahead and use our telescope. And look over there, next to a lantern, in an area he previously was not. That is Gostock. Just fascinating. Why is he following us? Well, as stated before, if we were to die, he's going to collect some of our runes. That's right. Our friend over there, if we die, will take 30% of our runes. Here's the thing, however. If you want your runes back and stop him from stealing them anymore, you can kill him. And any runes that he's collected from you will be returned to you, provided you have not killed the boss of Stormveil Castle. But I'm going to keep him alive, and I'm not even going to approach him. If you approach him in this location, he'll give you a single Grace Mimic, and he'll return to the room that we found him in, and he'll become a vendor. But we can get him to become a vendor without ever approaching him in one of his little secret spy locations, simply by progressing just a little bit more. So that is the route that we are going to take. Now, you can see here, these barrels, compared to this regular barrel. Let's go ahead and back up, and let's fire an arrow, a fire arrow specifically, at these barrels. They are explosive. You can see more up ahead, and you can see even more down there. Although, well, they're kind of hard to see because of the lighting. But as we approach these barrels, we're going to have more commoners, and they are going to throw some fire bombs. Not surprisingly, causing massive explosions. Fortunately for us, they don't seem to notice that they are also standing near some explosive barrels. So we can deal with him. Let him throw his firebomb. Not a problem. Take care of that one. We also have some more flammable or explosive barrels here. Jump up if you want to grab 10 St. Trina's arrows, which you absolutely do. These are the arrows that put enemies to sleep. Probably be using these rather soon. And if you'd like, you can now drop down. And this is where those exiled soldiers were that were guarding that one item. But we took care of those with our bow. See if we got any good loot here. We got a mushroom. Anything up top? It would not appear so. So instead of dropping down and taking some damage, though, you can just return this way. And it'll actually put us just on the other side. Didn't need to have that equipped. But on the other side of this little ambush here. Just on the other side of these exploding barrels. So grab our 3 smoldering butterflies. But now let's back up because we do have one bit of loot down below. This rather terrifying looking exiled soldier with the large axe down here, but once again, because we have some exploding barrels, we can make sure that he completely ignores those exploding barrels. That was okay. Let's try again with this one. Just love the thorns wrapping around the axe. Perfect. Good. Change nothing. Knock him down. A few guard counters. I was sure that he was within range, but I digress. On this corpse, we get the hook claws. If you want really fast hand weapons, the hook claws are actually pretty fun. Let's go ahead and put those on. You can see 8 strength requirement, 14 dexterity, causes a blood loss buildup of 60, and it does actually have an enhanced critical, 110. In one hand, you can see it like this, very, very quick. But if you two-hand it, you don't actually two-hand it, you actually become Wolverine. Very, very nice indeed. You can see a beautiful, beautiful combo. Comes with the quick step Ash of War. And some of the combos that you can do with this are just incredible. Really, really fun weapon. But let's go back to one of our Warhawk Talons. And let's keep pushing up. We have a door straight ahead that is locked. We're going to be getting the key shortly, but just to the right of it, we have 5 more throwing daggers. Item right there that we do have to drop down onto. And to get to that, all we need to do is drop down right here. Don't stay still for too long because there are some flammable barrels with someone's going to throw some more firebombs at you, but we have another golden rune level 2. Let's head back up towards him. And anytime you're not sure if there's going to be an ambush, there's no harm in completely missing your mighty shot and allowing them to hit you with a firebomb. That certainly wasn't worth the price of admission. Next up, we have this room right here. This room is a dead end, but it contains a really dangerous Banished Knight, another enemy who has some pretty severe wind attacks, but something's going to happen when we head in there. And it's probably time that I use my Flask of Wonders Physic. And probably should change my Talisman. Arrow's Reach isn't going to help us here. Let's go ahead and use... we'll just use Blessed Dew Talisman. I debated for a moment. turn on, make sure my lantern is equipped. Hopefully knock him down. No. Backstab. There we go. So this night, I find that guard counters are typically the way to go. Especially because it seems to stagger him pretty much every time. There we go. Get the knockdown, get the critical, and he is dead. Now, I've been reading a little bit about the history of Stormveil Castle, specifically who was the king before. And one theory that I've heard is that it was actually this drag. Oh, you don't get the effects of your lantern when you use a telescope. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that. But this dragon right here, it's not like any dragon we fight in the game. So there's a very real chance that that was the previous ruler of Stormveil. But again, more on that as we go through. The person who locked us away was Gostok, not Patches as I previously thought, but it is Gostok because he was so hoping that this night would be our downfall. But we get the rust key, which will open up that one locked door we saw, but even better. Well, not better because that's, actual progress. We get the Curved Sword Talisman. Curved Sword Talisman, if you are into the guard counters, is absolutely amazing. This increases the damage that you deal with a guard counter by 20%, but even cooler than that, and I mentioned this back when we got this talisman, the Blue Dancer Charm, this actually references the Blind Swordsman, the originator of the curved sword or the guard counter technique. The same legendary swordman that you find in the Blue Dancer Charm description. Just a really cool little mini story. So let's head back outside, and then we can drop down to this door right here and climb this lengthy ladder. Now at this point, because we've collected the rusty key, Gostok will actually become a merchant for us. To get him to become a vendor, you either need to find the key as we have, talk to him in one of his secret locations, or defeat the boss of Stormveil Castle. So we have a whole lot more of these commoners, and if we try to go this way, just be prepared that you are going to get pushed by one of these commoners. There we go. And while that may be the way forward, that's not the way we want to go. So right now I'm going to go ahead and get some mighty shots going. No reason to take these risks. And we got to jump over to this platform. You can see some items that are just out of reach. Fortunately for us, this platform is not. So let's head over here. Let's grab the fire grease. And we're going to jump over to the left. And head outside. Now be careful because we do have an exiled soldier coming up. I really should have just put on my guard counter charm. Especially now that he's brought friends with him. Luckily, guard counters against a crossbowman is one of my favorites because they'll do a kick that really doesn't do that much stamina damage. Hey, we got the soldier's crossbow. Very nice. And let's go ahead and use our cerulean flask. You can see where we have come from. And that is where Gostok was, but he has since moved locations. We'll see him in another one of his secret spots here in just a bit. And here we get an item that I referenced at the end of the last episode, the Brick Hammer. The Brick Hammer. Nice heavy-duty bludgeoning weapon. You can see it requires 31 strength, 0 dexterity, and it already has a B scaling in strength right from the get-go. This does only require 21 strength in order to two-hand, and just like the grafted blade greatsword that I use against Margit, this is not a bad option for two-handing and actually using guard counters with. It does have 74% physical damage negation, which is not too bad at all, but you can read here, wielded by a laborer who led a rebellion and later became a champion himself. I do think that this very well could have belonged to Hugh the Blacksmith that we saw in Round Table Hold. But that is it for this side loot. Let's go ahead and climb back up the ladder. Keep making our way forward. We already took care of the one commoner trying to push us down. Another commoner for the picking here. They can also drop another lightweight straight sword. It's called the Weathered Straight Sword, but that also has a 2% drop rate, which is shocking that I haven't gotten multiple of those by now. Get a Silver Pickled Foulfoot. Now here, what we want to do is before we go up the stairs, come over here and grab these 3 mushrooms, but also take a moment to notice what you have over here. This may look familiar. This is actually where you begin Elden Ring. We started in that church right there. We made our way down. And in that arena right there is where we fought the Grafted Scion, only to be sent down below, where we were met with Melina and Torrent for the first time. Now inside here we have another Banished Knight, this time with a halberd. So what I'm actually going to do is I am now going to put on the Curved Sword Talisman. And part of me also wants to put on a Fire Grease, but you know what? We'll just go as is. We're going to do some guard counters again. Now he does not stagger as easily as the other one. Oh. I did that on purpose so I could show you the rune loss from Gostock. As I said, let's go ahead and use a Fire Grease here. And we might as well use our Flask of Wondrous Physics since we recharged it. There we go, knock him down. And I'll show the runes here in just a moment. Get the kill. Now this lift is not going to be activated for some time, but remember we had, I believe, about 7,100 runes when we died. Less than 5,000. 30% up and vanished. And if I want those back, I have to kill Gostock, and I have to kill Gostock before I kill the boss of Stormveil Castle. Now there is an item over there, and we have a lever here that is non-operational. But I'm not going to get that item just yet. Instead, over here, once again, another lever, non-operational. Another lift, several of those, and we have our next site of grace. But I'm going to do 2 things before we actually wrap up the episode. First, I'm going to head out here, and I'm going to kill a couple more Stormhawk. This is the interior of Stormveil Castle. There's the main courtyard, lots and lots of enemies. And we have a cathedral here where we will meet Sorcerer Raje. Not this time. But for now, all I'm going to do is I'm going to kill some of these Stormhawks that have flaming barrels attached to their blades. And I'm going to do so just by using our flaming arrows. There we go. And the reason is to try and get another Warhawk's Talon, although that would be absolutely hilarious. It's because when you enter onto this roof right here, and just because I'm curious, I'm gonna go loot that one. Okay, good. But when you head back and you go back to that one shiny that we saw, just through this way, you can see a familiar face.
Another one, all skin and bones. Worse than a petty squire. Not a muscle on this one either.
You can see he's just going around trying to loot the corpses, including our own. But once again, I am going to leave him alone. We're going to go talk to him now, though, and see what he has available for sale. So I am going to rest here, get everything back, and now we'll fast travel to Stormveil main gate.
Oh, hello. Glad to see you're safe. I've come into some fine goods. Only it turns out I can't use a one of them. Perhaps you'd like to take them off my hands.
At this point, you can't tell him to raise the main gate, but more importantly, he sells silver pickled foulfoot, rune fragments, fertile calling finger remedies, festering bloody fingers, 5 of those stormhawk feathers, the cestus, which is the name that I have decided to go with for the rest of my life. If you would like to argue with me about its pronunciation down in the comments, you can go right ahead. I'm just so tired of this stupid word. I have seen so many pronunciations. Just for simplicity's sake, I am going to be calling this the cestus, a crowd favorite. We have great arrows, some more ballista bolts. We also have the buckler, and this is important because if you didn't start with the buckler, this is your first chance to get the buckler parry. Buckler parry do have a couple of additional active frames of parry time compared to the small shields. Now, once again, there are other skills later on that we can get that will help us with parrying, but if you're trying to learn how to parry, this will give you the opportunity to have a little bit of forgiveness in your timing. And then he also sells the bandit set. But even though we might have only just scratched the surface of Stormveil Castle, that is going to do it for this episode of Everything Possible in Elden Ring. I hope you learned something, and if you did, please leave me a comment down below and let me know what you learned, or if I missed something, or if you have a better strategy for dealing with Margit the Fell Omen, or if you've ever had double Warhawk Talons drop back to back, let me know that too, so we can all keep learning. But I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time.